All right, welcome back, everyone. I'd like to welcome to the stage Jennifer Stoller and Olivia Vo from the Family Defense Project and Youth Rights and Justice. And if there is time for questions at the end, please ask your questions into the microphone so that those who are hard of hearing or those that need to access the recording for a reason later can do so. All right, without further ado.
Do you want me to start? I'm figuring out the technology here. Okay. My name is Jennifer Stoller. I'm an attorney with Youth Rights and Justice. We are a public defense nonprofit that represents children and parents in juvenile court. And a few years ago, I don't know how much I'm going to go off the slides, to be honest. We'll just say that now. And we welcome questions and comments at any point. So we've been representing kids and parents for 50 years, and several years ago, we sort of built some momentum around the fact that we can help families a lot more and help prevent removals if we are working with them before a juvenile court case is filed. The statistics, at least among our cases, and let me tell you, we are lawyers, we are not statisticians. The joke about lawyers and math, like we all count on our fingers. But our kind of personal stats are that if a case is filed in juvenile court, in our cases, we see about 90% of kids removed from their families. And so our goal continues to be, and was in developing this project, to bring that number down, to work with people ahead of time on sort of legal issues, CPS investigations, so that we are reducing that trauma, because a huge proportion of the families that are the parents involved in juvenile court, so many of them were involved in the system somehow as children, whether that's in foster care themselves, whether that's a string of CPS assessments, or they were in foster care. And so that's our goal with this project. I've been a lawyer for about 25 years. I worked at Legal Aid in 2 states, so a similar population, and have been at YRJ for 11 years.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us. My name is Olivia Vo. I'm the Family Engagement Specialist for our program. So I provide non-legal case management and social work support to our clients. Prior to this, I worked as a CPS worker, so I do have an idea of how the system works, how to support parents, and how to hold the agency accountable. So I think Jennifer and I are a good team supporting parents in legal ways and non-legal ways.
I giggled at the disclosure slide because I was like, we're public defenders, like nobody gives us money. There are no pharmaceutical companies trying to get my influence. So I did get a good laugh about this. I think one of the things that's been incredibly helpful with our project is our multidisciplinary approach. You all know this, you all do this as well. The working with different disciplines that are all working towards the same goal and bring their different strengths. We don't have the funding yet, but it is my goal to bring on a peer, because I think that that is a hugely impactful piece that we don't have yet. And so I'm going to be honest, we rely kind of heavily on Project Nurture peers often to help with that piece. But so we focus on legal issues and needs that are directly related to keeping kids out of foster care. And what we have found, and it looks a little different depending on what stage the family is at. So a lot of what we do with your patient client population is helping navigate CPS investigations. The other piece of that can sometimes be assisting with restraining orders, representing people. There are a lot of great resources in our community on getting that initial restraining order. The Gateway Center has a pretty good system set up, but then if someone challenges that restraining order, there's not a lot of support for people in making sure that that happens. Also kind of immediate danger orders, walking people through a lot of the family law paperwork. We're not in a position, we don't have the capacity to do full-scale custody representation, because that can last for years and just get really messy. But certainly helping walk people through that process. We have multiple times helped people, just demystifying the process a little bit. This is how you get a subpoena. This is how you do these things, and walking them through it. Sometimes, depending on the person's kind of capacity at that moment, sometimes that means that we walk them to the courthouse and help walk them through that.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, we're not family law experts. We're also not, I know on here there's education issues, landlord-tenant problems, clearing criminal warrants. We don't specialize in any of those things, but we find that a lot of our clients, if they have an open CPS case, there's many other things going on in their lives, right? So a client can come to us and say, I just gave birth and I need some help filing for custody, but then we also find that there's many other issues as well. And we can refer out to other attorneys as well if there is a landlord-tenant issue or if there is something that we don't specialize in. And yeah, we can talk a little bit about maybe our referrals. So it's been almost 3 years now, but we spent a lot of time and still ongoing work in establishing our referral sources, because that's usually people's first questions is how do you get clients? And so, we've spent a lot of time kind of doing outreach, and we rely heavily on Project Nurture, but we try to really focus on going as upstream as possible. So how do we get our info out to the moms and dads who need it the most? And Project Nurture is a perfect example of a program that focuses on helping moms and dads as early as possible, early in their pregnancy.
So I think a good example of how it goes, if somebody refers a pregnant mother to us, a pregnant person, or someone who just gave birth, is Chelsea in the room? Okay. Chelsea Barber calls me at 5:15 last night. Mom just gave birth. DHS is sending somebody out. And I won't get too far into that because that is too easily identifiable. But, I'm happy to take calls where, and I will get on with the parent to talk through where are things at. Okay, what information do we need to start gathering? Who are what stage are you in your recovery journey? Because that tells me what I think DHS's response might be. I wish that I could provide certainty about what DHS's response will be, but I'll tell you probably most DHS people wouldn't be able to provide that, wouldn't be able to tell you in a hypothetical what their response would be. And so we plan as best we can. And my emphasis is always, so while technically I'm a mandatory reporter, I also have attorney-client confidentiality, which puts me kind of in an interesting position. But it means that what my client tells me about their use or their recovery, I'm not going to say. And so while it's the goal, it's best for people's treatment, for their medical situation, that they're transparent, there is always that risk that as mandatory reporters, I'm guessing most of you are mandatory reporters, you will have to share that information in a way that I don't have to. And because Olivia is part of my office, she is also covered by that, which is huge for us. So, you know, I pretty quickly try to triage where we're at and what supports to put in place and give them a sense of what is likely to happen. My goal, I'm not always able to make it happen, but my goal is to be there at the hospital when DHS comes, if that's what my client wants. I think one of the key pieces is that this is always client-driven. I don't have an independent medical obligation to the baby. I mean, obviously, I want babies to do well, but I don't have an independent obligation to the baby or to the parent to make sure that their health is as good as possible. My job is to provide advice, give options, and help them move through the process in the way that they choose. And so that's always our goal. But I also am very frank. I figured out a long time ago that it wasn't very trauma-informed not to be frank with not to be frank with people. I mean, I'm not rude about it, but I'm going to be honest, and I tell them that, and they're not necessarily,
If you have a positive UA, you might not be able to, yeah. And also back to the client-driven, at the end of the day, it's what our clients, what do they see in their future? What do they want for their family? What do they want for their baby? I'm thinking of that client who ended up signing over guardianship. We get lots of calls about guardianships. Guardianships are complicated, as we all know. We don't specialize them, and we don't work with a lot of guardianships, but this one client, Jennifer was really able to give her all of the information she needed so she could make an informed decision, and she ended up signing over guardianship to her mom. When we started our program, right, it's like keeping kids with their parents, keeping kids out of foster care, but at the end of the day, it's really just the representation and making sure parents can feel informed. And I think this mom, it was a sad situation, but she did what she felt like was best for her and her baby.
While understanding the risks of a guardianship, or hopefully, I communicated and hopefully she understood the risks of a guardianship. Which a guardianship can be incredibly messy. A probate guardianship can mean that you don't get your child back if you don't show that it's in the child's best interest.
We do get calls. If anyone can't hear me, let me know. I'm just gonna, it's hard with the two microphones. We get calls frequently from not only DHS, but other providers about hey, I'm working with this family and there's this aunt that wants guardianship, or I'm trying to get guardianship of my granddaughter or my grandson, and those are cases we don't assist with. Not that a guardianship might not be the best possible option in that case, but it can just get too messy, and we try to focus our work with biological parents and their kids.
So, we're really trying to quickly build relationships such that we have the trust of these parents that we're talking to. I should also clarify, we often end up interacting with both parents if they are at the hospital. Ethically, we can only represent one parent because they may be at odds in the future. And so we only represent one. We often end up interacting with the other.
That helps.
So the other piece that we try to do that I touched on is kind of gathering information so that we've got that information in one place. My family laughs at me because I roll around with a file folder full of releases for every hospital in the metro area, and a DHS release and a blank release that just sits in my bag all the time. And there are some in the trunk of my car. And because sometimes helping, you all have, this isn't your primary job. It's your primary job to work with this parent, but in terms of interacting with DHS and having the information that DHS will want to develop a safety plan that keeps a parent and child together, that's not primarily what you do. And so we try to gather as much of that information. I was recently with a client and I'm getting like, okay, who are your safe relatives? Where do they live? What is their contact information? What can I talk to them about? Like, what do I have your permission to talk about? Because I am not gonna, the fastest way to lose trust and get a bar complaint is to go spread someone's information. And so I try to be very specific about that.
Yeah, and if we can get an ROI from DHS as early as possible before they even show up at the hospital, then we can coordinate, figure out who the worker is, and intervene before they meet with the parent. So even if they're in the car or on the way over, even if they haven't gone out or even looked at the report, at least we can be like, hey, we're representing this parent. We understand the situation, what your concerns might be, but if you could please, moving forward, keep us involved, and please don't meet with this client without us. That's the ideal scenario, but it doesn't always work out that way.
The breakout center I was just in on sort of working the DHS involvement piece, Keontae was talking about kind of the safety risks that can be involved and the concerns about upset parents. And what I have found, and what our clients tell us over and over again, is that things are calmer if we're in the room, that they feel like our clients are less defensive if they have somebody there that's advocating for them. And I will tell you, I'm not sure it goes very much different. Like, I don't know that the assessment interview goes that much differently, except that it's calmer if we're in the room. Because I very rarely say, don't answer that question. Mm-hmm. Because the truth is that if there's a positive UA, there's a positive UA, and like that information is out there. So stonewalling doesn't help anyone.
Yeah, I think it took, especially DHS, a while to realize that we're not necessarily there to fight with them. I mean, if we need to, we will, but that's not what, we're not going into it trying to argue against their plan or, but yeah, it took us building trust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I would love to invoke the Fifth Amendment more in my life than I do as a lawyer.
Just not productive.
I would really like to. I just almost never get to do it. Don't answer that. Because, we are realists. The information DHS has is the information we're going to work with and move forward on. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to ask the questions like, has this UA been confirmed? Like, mm-hmm. What, if you were working, in the prenatal period, like, were there negative UAs as well as positive? Because sometimes what filters through to the CPS worker is positive UA, not necessarily all the other information.
Yeah, and it gives us being involved also, I think, gives these workers a sense of urgency. Like, hey, I can't just kind of keep this case and maybe like write up this, safety plan that makes no sense. So it's really holding them accountable. And yeah, I'm thinking of, us being in the room definitely makes things calmer for the most part. I'm thinking of one of our longest clients who's very near and dear to my heart, but she had this case that was open for a really long time, a caseworker who she did not get along with, and anytime she met with him, she would just start crying. Like, that was just her immediate trauma response to seeing him in the room. And what the result of that was that he didn't really know anything about her. She wasn't giving him the information he needed. And I found that when we were involved in the room, I was at least able to help share some of her strengths and kind of be a mediator. And we left that meeting, the meeting actually went really well, and they were able to kind of establish some sort of working relationship after that, and a safety plan that was pretty solid.
So safety plans, you all have heard about safety plans. And you in the back, correct me if I define this incorrectly, but Safety plans are, in essence, DHS's framework for how can we maintain safety of this child with a parent. And that can include a variety of things. It can be everywhere from a paid person 24/7 with the family to a safety plan that is like somebody shows up twice a week and checks and makes sure things are going well. And so coming to DHS with the elements of a safety plan is really key at these early stages, because then they're not having to create something from whole cloth. We are sometimes able to get family members to talk to us that are less likely to talk to DHS because of familial experience and trauma around DHS involvement.
And getting creative with safety plans too. I mean, we've seen a lot of different workers work safety plans you wouldn't think would be approved have been approved. You know, like there's a lot you can push for to keep a child with their parent. There's a lot of resources, community resources, family members. I mean, there's a way to make it happen in most cases.
Yeah, and staying involved as long as DHS is involved.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we have a case right now where the CPS assessment has been open a really, really long time, and I actually cornered the worker at court last week to say, is that still open? Yes, it's still open. So sometimes we're not very successful in pushing DHS to get those things closed, but often we are, because I will keep contacting them and their supervisor, just because that's that ongoing low level or high level stress of having DHS in your life. And I think someone mentioned it maybe in the breakout room about that stress of DHS involvement. And, you know, we have this now funny story in my family. Wasn't funny at the time, of, you know, one of my kids getting hospitalized and me being convinced, because we didn't believe him when he said he couldn't breathe. Turned out he really couldn't breathe because he was satting 77 at the doctor's office. So he went to the ICU. It was a whole scene. And I was like, somebody's gonna call DHS. Like, they should call DHS on us. Like, what have we been doing? And my husband is a doctor. I mean, he's not that kind of doctor. Like, if you're sick, you don't go to him. But but yeah, that fear in me as a lawyer, or the time that my youngest rolled down the stairs because my husband, are you noticing a theme? Yeah. Didn't put the gate up and is like bruised all over. And so, yeah, it's a real fear in people, you know, and my husband and I are white and highly educated and have tons of resources, and I was afraid.
Yeah, and we all know parents who have that chronic DHS involvement, they're always going to be on the radar, right? So they're going to be, you know, we have that one client we've been working with for a while who, I mean, she's scared to send her kids to, I mean, you know, she's getting calls because her kids have lice, you know, things like that. And yeah, I mean, we understand that these parents are always going to be on the radar, and how do we support them through that and minimize the trauma?
And I think one of the things that we try to do is also show our clients that people individually involved with DHS, these are people with the best of intentions. They have a job, but being angry at this individual person usually hurts you. And so trying to help them feel a level of safety with us, at least, and with their peers, and with other people, so that they can come into those meetings and build some level of relationship with the people at DHS, because that's going to help get DHS feel more secure and get them out.
Yeah, and also, yeah, not, and also not to overshare with DHS. It's, you know, so that's why our role is really important, that we have that attorney-client relationship, so we can be that support for them, confidential support.
So, again, we're not statisticians. I don't really even understand statistics, but we are seeing some benefits. We are seeing kind of anecdotally that even our cases where the agency does decide to file in juvenile court, we are seeing more in-home plans. And you know, what I tell clients if we do get to that stage is whether it's in court or not in court is less important than whether your kids are with you. That's the most crucial part of this process. And the goal, and frankly, sometimes I'm happier to have things court involved where there's more checks and balances than just sort of floating in the CPS investigation stage for months.
Just something they call hidden foster care.
Yeah, there has been kind of a growing recognition over the last several years of the impacts of things like guardianships or powers of attorney or other situations where kids are removed from their parents and may be placed with relatives, but not in a financially sustainable way. And there isn't really oversight of that. And I will tell you, as a lawyer for parents, I have mixed feelings. Because on one hand, you want these kids where the parents want them. And if the parents want them with grandparents or aunts and uncle, that's fantastic. But let's make it sustainable for everybody. Yeah, but again and again, what our clients tell us, and I would say that we do a broad spectrum of levels of representation. Sometimes we have clients who are contacting us almost daily and wanting advice and wanting us at every single thing. And then we have clients who we meet with and we come up with a plan, and then they're okay talking to the DHS worker without me. Or talking to Katie without me yesterday. And they're fine, and if they're fine with that, I'm fine with that. As I often tell DHS, I mean, I can't be at every meeting. Like, I just don't have time for that. So we get them comfortable advocating on their own.
Yeah, we've had clients reach out, and we've met with them once. We've helped them draft up custody paperwork, and that's been it. And we've also had clients for well over a year that we just provide ongoing support to. I mean, Jennifer and I's relationship with clients also can look different. Sometimes she's more involved or I'm more involved. If she's helping draft up paperwork or going with clients to court, or sometimes there's situations where it's maybe not like a pressing legal need. It's more so just that, emotional support. Yeah.
And we're happy to talk to clients at any point in the process. Obviously, just like in your work, the earlier the better. So that we can all come up with a plan. And sometimes I think that we have worked well with Project Nurture, with me sort of, them emphasizing the benefits of abstinence medically and me emphasizing the benefits of abstinence legally. And sometimes that's helpful. Sometimes it's not. People are where they are in their journey. But, I will certainly do my best to show up, even if they haven't come to your attention until they're in the hospital.
Yeah.
Which is pretty common.
And we also recognize that you may be working with moms and dads who, after delivery, maybe there is no DHS case, and that's amazing, but it never hurts for us to be involved. I think early on we were just still trying to figure out how to frame our involvement and our support to parents. Because if you're working with a mom who's far into her recovery, she's approaching her due date, suggesting, oh, hey, do you want to call these lawyers, just in case something happens? It can be a little bit scary, right? Especially if we don't think there's going to be DHS involvement. But we really try to frame it as more so just like support just in case you need it, you know? You don't have to call us back. You know, we don't have to open up a case for you, but at least you have our phone number in case something does happen. The earlier the better, really. Yeah.
And I think also for you all assessing kind of what your clients, your patients' relationship to DHS will be and what their trigger level will be. We've represented 2 clients who had children die in foster care. And so even the thought that there might be a hotline call. And so we were pulled in just to be like, just so we could say, we'll be there, even though they were both doing incredibly well, and there was no reason to think there would be a call.
We were in the room when the hotline call was made. She was in tears, you know, understandably. And, you know, the call ended up being closed at screening, but she was really, really grateful for our support. Yeah.
And that was 100% worth our time to be in the room. Because, I don't know, I mean, the fact that those 2 women were still standing
Yeah,
in and of itself was huge.
Yeah. We've worked with a lot of our clients have been in the system themselves. I mean, it's a lot of generational trauma. It's a lot of trauma.
Let's see. I mean, just in case you are interested, here are a few resources about pre-petition advocacy, this idea of being involved before the juvenile court is involved, including the clinic that Sarah mentioned, the first clinic in Seattle or Everett that she worked with, that were really very early adopters of pushing this model of working with pregnant and postpartum people.
Highly successful program.
Yes. That has made some really great legislative changes as well in Washington. Very impressive. We're working on it. I mean, the best ways to contact us are, you know, email or phone. I didn't put my cell phone on this slide, but I'm happy to give it to anyone. I think a lot of Project Nurture folks have it, but we are always happy to help. Our services are free. I forget to say that because I feel like everyone should assume that because I'm a public defender, but then I realize lots of people don't know what a public defender is. And if you don't know, I'm glad. Yes, we have some grant money. We have some, as part of our public defense contract with the state, we have some funding to do this work. We work just in Multnomah County, unless you sort of get through to me and then I give you advice from other counties. But we have been successful in finding people in other counties to help. When we have conflicts because of previous cases, we find somebody else. I think I've referred to almost every firm doing juvenile law. I've been working on my colleagues for a couple of years now. We are happy for questions or comments or anything.
Thank you. So I had a question. You talked a lot about CPS. What about family preservation cases? Because I think some people have a really great experience with family preservation. People in the room might not know what it is. But sometimes I hear from clients, they're like, I don't want a family preservation case, but I don't feel like I can say no. And I don't think that DHS recognizes that enough.
Yes.
They call them cooperative cases.
Yeah.
Are they cooperative?
So family preservation is a pilot program. I don't know if it's even a pilot program, but a program at a couple of branches where they provide, where DHS says, we're not going to file this case in juvenile court if you agree to work with us. And I mean, I loved it. I had a client recently say to them, well, that doesn't sound very voluntary to me. And I was like, it's not. I don't know that there are, from my perspective, I don't know that there are a ton of benefits of having DHS still involved, but not court involved. But in any event, we stay involved in those cases. Yes, I'm happy to do that because people do get to the point where, because what's fuzzy, one of the many fuzzy things about family preservation cases, so there are intensive cases where the idea is that a worker is visiting a family once a week, whereas a normal court-involved case, it's visiting once a month. So it's very intensive, but it's very fuzzy about when it's going to close. And so sometimes parents don't feel like they can ask for it to be closed. So yes, we are involved. Yeah, sometimes people have great experiences. 100%. Yeah, and sometimes people are like, I don't even know what this person is doing except popping up at my house once a week, and that's really annoying. Which fair, no one pops up at my house once a week, anybody. So.
We've had mostly positive experiences with family pres, and if it's to avoid court involvement and help work a safety plan, totally. I think those are actually the perfect cases for us to be involved in because it's ongoing long-term DHS involvement. Without us, there'd be no legal support. You know, these parents aren't assigned attorneys in these cases, so.
Thank you, guys. I have two separate questions, sort of related, but sort of different. One is, I'm curious about your guys' experience with these cases that sort of expand across the river. I mean, Washington, right? Mm-hmm. Because one of the big problems with DHS that we run into is when there's a supportive family member in Vancouver, they're born at Portland, and suddenly they can't use that. And so I'm curious about whether or not you guys have any experience or ideas around that, or whether that's fixable or just an absolute barrier that there's nothing to do anything about. The other question is just, we take care of so many patients. Again, this sort of question like, who do we call you guys for? We can't call you for everybody. Are there hot button things that should make us every time think, oh my gosh, we should call you for this particular situation?
That's a great question. I'll take the second one first. I mean, I think if somebody has disclosed use within the last month, call us. I mean, I will also say that there are some hospitals that will call simply because of a positive meconium test. And I don't know what every hospital does, but from my perspective as a lawyer, that seems pretty problematic because it's about a current risk of harm. And I think my view of mandatory reporting stuff is it's, abuse happening now or threat of harm. But so, I mean, if they disclose use within the last month, seems like a good line or more. I mean, we'll take anything.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm just thinking like we worked with a client who had no use in her pregnancy, but a call and a case was open because she had, was it like maybe 2 or 3 prior removals? So, I mean, it's really hard to say when DHS will open a case. I mean, yeah, any use during pregnancy, especially within the past month, a history of prior removals or TPRs. But then you can get into like, we've had, if there's ongoing domestic violence, housing instability, houseless, if a client's actively houseless. I mean, I don't know if I have a clear answer to your question, but yeah, I mean, there's so many different situations why DHS might be called.
And about Washington. It's so, I have had cases where they have let somebody from Washington be a safety service provider, and I've had them, and they moved to Washington. And we've had cases where DHS won't let somebody from Washington be involved, and it's just so worker dependent. And I feel like it's become increasingly less consistent at the agency about many things, which honestly makes me think we probably need to be involved more because it's harder for me to predict what will happen.
When I was a CPS worker, we weren't allowed to, anything across the river. So there could be no safety service providers in the state. But again, I don't know if that's their policy. I've seen it done. But I don't think that it's common, and I don't think it's encouraged for Oregon workers to work safety plans in Washington. Yeah.
Chris, do you have anything to say about that?
I was just saying there was a memorandum of understanding between Washington and Oregon that allowed us to do some safety services up there, including planning. I think that the administration up in Washington weren't aware of it, so it kind of is defunct right now. But I wrote that down to try to figure out and get back to everyone on.
To the treatment center, if she goes to Washington, her worker has a FUP voucher for her, a Section 8 voucher, and her kid will be placed with her right away. Why are we keeping her here? And they were like, well, it's just easier to plan for outpatient treatment and this and this. And I was like, okay, well, and then they said, well, she doesn't want to go to Washington. So I asked the mom, like, you do know that I talked to your worker, and if you go to Washington, she has a Section 8 voucher for you, and you'll get your kid back. And she's like, no. And so I refused to take the mom, and she ended up in an Oxford house in Washington within like 24 hours. So sometimes it really just takes somebody like figuring out those pieces, because we're all overwhelmed and busy. And like, I don't think the treatment center was trying to do anything wrong. It's just normal for them to refer to Oregon and this, and they know the Oregon programs. And having that Washington barrier does make things hard. And the Washington worker was like, yeah, like, and I think it was also because I was like, yeah, I'm not going to take her. Like, you figure it out. And they did, right? And the Washington worker was great because I gave her resources and walked her through how to find an Oxford house in Washington. And then she paid for it and she did it. So sometimes it's just like having somebody who knows the system, which is what those two are really good at, and understanding that. Because if you don't have court, and you have a safe parent in Washington, and DHS is saying, we want to safety plan, like legally, like there's no court involvement yet, so the parent can still plan with people in Washington, unless there's like, they've gone to court, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for your presentation and being here today. I've got a couple questions for you. I'll just ask them all, and feel free to pause me if you want. But I'm wondering if there's any criteria to qualify for your services.
Oh, I forget about that stuff. So you're supposed to be able to qualify for court-appointed counsel to get our services. And like 99% of the parents in juvenile court qualify. And so often what we use as a proxy is, are you on OHP? If you're on OHP, okay, that'll work. So I often ask people about benefits, and we just use that. And then if for some reason they're not, then we start trying to get creative.
Okay, thank you. And then, is there a best stage of pregnancy to connect someone with you? Like, do you only want to see folks in their third trimester, or does it matter?
I mean, probably the third trimester makes the most sense, just from it's hard to tell in the first and second what the situation will be. Yeah. But if it's a person that you're trying to work to continue to engage and you think it might be helpful, okay, we're happy to talk to them at any point.
Okay. And if we have a patient who's pregnant but has an older child with child welfare involvement, are you able to help with the older child as well?
That will depend on if there's child welfare involvement and they have an attorney, say it's already juvenile court involved, we wouldn't be able to directly help. I would be coaching their court attorney through that process of what to do. But if it's just an open CPS investigation and they don't have an attorney, then yes.
Okay, thank you. And then last question here. I'm trying to wrap my mind around all the different, legal and programmatic terminology, but I think you mentioned you're not able to work on custody cases, I believe. But are you able to go to court with patients, or only able to provide kind of support and recommendations outside of a court case?
So I'm happy to help people fill out paperwork, like legal documents, and get those filed and walk them through the process of what would be involved in court. And from there, whether or not I appear in court is kind of on a case-by-case basis. If it's a restraining order hearing, I'm likely to go, because that person is likely to need additional support. But in terms of a custody trial or a custody modification, those are things that we provide advice and assistance about, but not long-term representation.
Okay, I think you, oh my God, that's loud. Okay, I think you already pretty much answered my question, because I work with a lot of pregnant and postpartum people that are high risk, so at risk, not involved already, or becoming involved. So if I were to, so they don't have to actually be involved with child welfare or be involved in juvenile court, correct?
They do not.
Okay.
There needs to be some risk that they will be involved.
Okay. And then, so my other question is, oh my gosh, my other question is like, what would be the best way to refer or, just like suggest or guide them towards you guys?
Sure. So Olivia stopped by I was running out of business cards, so she stopped by the office and got my business cards. I'm happy to hand out my business cards, and you can hand those to people to call or email me. I think Olivia has some. I'm also, whatever's easiest for you. If it's easiest for you to hand someone my card and they contact me, or if it's easier for you to say, here's this person's information, can you contact them?
Clients can self-refer, or you can just give them my cell phone number. Yeah. Whatever they're most comfortable with.
I think you guys already, I think you guys already kind of answered this question, but what if family's family is already trying to take that child and DHS isn't involved? Like, DHS might become involved eventually, but like there's a family dynamic where grandma is just like gunning for that kid, or FOB's family, or what have you, and like, that.
I mean, we're happy to talk to people depending on the situation. We might be able to help. We're happy to talk to them and figure out if we can help.
I just have a comment. I just wanted to say that this program is amazing, and that all of the Project Nurture patients that I have referred to Family Defense have felt so supported and heard. Like, we're doing a lot of like emotional and behavioral supports, right? And but we don't have that legal piece, right? And so all of the clients that I have referred have felt safer because they have legal representation, right? And it's really about, at this key time, about feeling safe and how we can create that safe space. And these folks do that. They come to the hospital, maybe like at the drop of a hat. I called Jennifer last night at 5:30. She answered her cell phone. We talked. It's all, yeah, oh good. I was in a meeting. But it's great. And so I would highly recommend that anybody you think has a risk factor for child welfare involvement, give them a call and they can decide if that's going to be a good fit. So,
Yeah. Well, and we have felt so grateful to have, I think we've gotten to the point with Project Nurture Legacy where we all know what each other does. And so, I know that Sarah or Julie has got this piece, and I know Chelsea's got this piece, and we've got this piece, and all.
Yeah, we really found a way to make it work without like duplicating work too, because that was a concern that DHS had, was like, well, wouldn't like my Olivia's role be duplicating what a CPS worker is doing? But no, I mean, I think we kind of find ways to support and like, and it works really well. Well,
It's mostly just us two. I mean,
we just brought on
We-
2 other.
yeah, we had a week right before Christmas where I was like, I cannot do 6 new people in by myself. Like the week before Christmas. And so
It's not always like really
Yeah.
urgent needs. Sometimes it's, but yeah.
yeah, we kind of make it work. And like I said, I've been working on my colleagues in the juvenile bar for a couple of years, and my office mate, I've been working on her.
Yeah, there's a couple other attorneys in our office who are really interested in this work too, so they can take cases as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was just curious if there's anything like this in Washington, because I work up at Salmon Creek. We don't have Project Nurture. We don't have a lot of resources. So if there's anything in Washington that's similar.
There is. So what's a little, I don't exactly know the level of coverage in counties in Washington. So there's the program that Sarah worked with, the First Clinic, that's in Everett. First is in Everett, right? Yeah. But they went to the legislature when the legislature in Washington was flush with COVID money and got money to expand. And now it's being handled kind of at the state level. So the last time we had somebody who contacted us from Clark County, I reached out to the person from one of the people that Sarah worked with, and he just gave me his cell phone to give to the patient, which is like the same thing I would do. Like, we're all kind of, so I don't know if Clark County itself has its own program, but he was willing to provide support. So I can double check with him.
So for Clark County specifically, it's called Navigate Law Group. They are a law group that do free legal clinics every Thursdays. It's a phone clinic, so you sign up online and you select what category you need, and it's a free 20-minute phone call with a lawyer. They're not legal representation. They just provide questions and answers on any of the questions you have of the legal process or anything that has to do with law. And you can repeat sign up. You can sign up as much as you want. They saved me during a legal process that I was not prepared for, that I could not afford. So it's, again, Navigate Law Group, and it's just navigatelawgroup.com, but they serve Clark County.
That's awesome.
I think we have time for one last question. I think that was 7 awkward seconds.
Yes. I think we can call it.